Tuesday. Good day, people. How are we? Thank you for hanging with us. Me and Max holding things down here in Bristol. Stephen A. in the nation's capital. Good morning, gentlemen.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing?
What's going on, Stephen A?
I'm good.
See you went to the game last night.
Let me brag about this, man. Not only did I go to the game.
Oh, here we go.
But as a diehard Steelers fan, I'm behind the Steelers bench at the 50-yard line. I mean, I had a beautiful, beautiful night. I got to admit it. I mean, it was special. You know, I didn't think the Steelers would win this game. I do believe they're going to win about 12 games this year. But I got to tell you, to just have that close-up view like that, it was. I must admit, I'm bragging right now.
It
was
nice.
special. It was special.
I changed a diaper yesterday.
It was
That's
nice.
good.
Yeah.
I watched a nice big screen TV, so that was comfy. I had popcorn. That was enjoyable.
It's good to be, it's good to be Stephen A. Smith sometimes.
It is, and it's good to be normal. I'm just your average Joe.
It's all relative. It's all relatives. I've been there where I've changed the diapers, believe it or not, and I've been there where I just sat on my couch and watched on the big screen. So it's all relative, y'all. It's all relative. It's okay. I'm here for y'all.
Okay,
if I'm there, y'all are there.
Okay, thanks. I'll let you know when I'm behind the bench at the 50-yard line when that happens.
I'll be changing a diaper behind the 50-yard line.
You do that. You do that. You do that.
Let's get into it. Coming up a couple days after vacationing on Revis Island, A.J. Green joining us. But you know where we're kicking things off. Monday Night Football, where it was a tight game early. Then Stephen A. became a happy man because the Steelers, who are missing a few key offensive weapons, went off, torched the Redskins defense at FedEx Field 38-16. We were all looking forward to the Antonio Brown-Josh Norman matchup, but Norman rarely covered Brown. Brown had his 26th career 100-yard receiving game. Big Ben, 3 pass TDs. D'Angelo Williams, not a bad day in the office. 143 yards rushing, filling in for Le'Veon Bell. Stephen A., what was going on Washington's defense?
Well, we don't know, and guess why? Because they don't seem to know what the hell they're doing. Let's just call it like we saw it last night. It just seemed like the Washington hierarchy does not know what the hell they're doing, and it extends to their coaches. I'm only talking about one game. We're not acting as if this is going to be a prelude to a disastrous season. We'll pump the brakes on that for the time being. They've got divisional foes in the NFC East to deal with because the Washington Redskins, who, by the way, did not have a single victory against the winning team all of last year. We are trying to find out whether or not they are fraudulent, whether or not they're legit, or are they just a product of playing in a subpar or a very competitive division that reeks mediocrity in the end. That's what we're talking about here because they're clearly not on the same level as the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers absolutely dominated them last night. They stomped them. They beat them down. As far as I'm concerned, they humiliated the Washington Redskins on Monday Night Football. And I don't believe I'm engaging in hyperbole there, Max, saying what I'm saying. Antonio Brown put on an absolute show. I know Bashan Breeland says that he's not going to hang his head. If you think I'm going to hang my head, you don't know me very well. Whatever the hell he said. I'm not saying that he should for the rest of the season, but he should be hanging his head all week long. He got embarrassed last night. He got schooled. Now, in his defense, he got schooled by the very best that there is at the wide receiver position in a game of football today. There's nobody better than Antonio Brown. There's just nobody better. This dude is on another level. I think it's actually insulting to call him special. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to call him special. He's on another level. Now, Max, let me take you inside because, like I said, I was at the game. I was at the 50-yard line, which means I was also in the locker room post-game because that's the reporter in me. This is what I do. I'm in the locker room for the Steelers post-game. And from Coach Mike Tomlin to Antonio Brown to numerous players on the Steelers, whether it be on the offensive line or the defensive side of the ball or whatever, they were in unison in this one incredulous question. How in God's name was Antonio Brown single covered? And literally you're up in his grill and you're not tailing off, you're not doing anything. They could not believe that there was no one over top to help out Breeland. They could not believe that Antonio Brown was in single coverage for most of this game. They could not believe that Josh Norman didn't find himself going up against Antonio Brown for more than 3 or 4 plays in the game. they sat up there like I literally had one of the players say to me, quote, they acted like he was just some regular old receiver. Not the dude that's caught 375 passes over the last 3 years for 1,400, 16 plus 100, and then 18 plus 100 yards the last 3 years. I mean, what the hell was Jay Gruden and his staff thinking? It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, literally, guys, I am not exaggerating. I swear to you, I am not exaggerating. The Steelers went from, like, exuding incredulousness to literally feeling insulted, like, did they not know who the hell they're dealing with? And not only is Antonio Brown that great, but he doesn't have a scrub throwing him the football. He's a two-time Super Bowl champion who's been to 3 Super Bowls, who's destined for the Hall of Fame. By the way, Big Ben Roethlisberger had on a pretty fly suit last night, but that's a different subject for another day. I wouldn't have worn that color, but he pulled it off. I want to give him props for that. Since I gave him props for his wardrobe in the locker room, I thought it would be apropos to give him props for that right here on national television because the suit was looking pretty fly. But I will tell you, they were shocked, and so was I. In the end, what this comes down to is that we don't know what the hell the Redskins were thinking because I don't think the Redskins knew what they were doing last night. And I spoke to Josh Norman after the game. He didn't want to question the coaching methods. He didn't want to question their schemes. He didn't want to question anybody. You know, he got into it a little bit with his teammate Bruton for a little while. But he said that was just 2 guys going at it, arguing about coverage and stuff like that. But it was no big deal. And D'Angelo Hall, of all people, were the one that stopped them from getting into it with one another. But he said he wasn't going to question the staff. But he definitely wanted the challenge. And when I spoke to Antonio Brown after the game, he said that he's friends with Josh Norman. And obviously they exchanged jerseys on the field at the end of the game and all of that other stuff. And they seemed really, really close. So that seems genuine and legit. But he was shocked as to Josh Norman not being in his face a bit more. And he said that there was no doubt that Josh Norman wanted that challenge. So, again, I got to look at the Redskins coaching staff, Max, and say what the hell they were doing. I don't have the answer to the question. But to me, that's the game right there. How do you leave Antonio Brown in single coverage and expect to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers? Cincinnati clearly is not going to do that next week. We all know that. I don't know what the hell the Washington Redskins were thinking. I don't know.
The reason that Washington lost and what they were doing on defense was playing the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. This is what's going to happen to teams, even good defensive teams. We don't know what the Washington defensive situation is going to look like all year. You presume they've gotten better. At least they spent some money in the secondary because they just played an offense which we thought last year, at least I did and many others did, was going to be an historically great offense. Then they all couldn't get on the field at the same time, healthy together. And then again this year, no Martavis Bryant and no Le'Veon Bell, but still an historically great offense. This is what happens when you play that kind of team. And maybe they're single covering because they're thinking, look, we didn't spend money on the line. We spent money in the secondary. Let's put them to work. Go ahead. Go ahead, Breland, cover Antonio Brown, which is, of course, ridiculous. If the idea is we're going to let Antonio Brown get his and just cover everyone else, well, he got his and he beat you. No, this is what happens when you play the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is why I picked them last night. And it's not coincidence that, look, Antonio Brown is amazing, and they compared him during the broadcast last night to Jerry Rice in terms of his work ethic and everything. Apropos, he is, look, he's the best wideout in football because you can't prove otherwise. All the evidence points to Antonio Brown. I will say, I think if you put Odell Beckham Jr. on that team, he would put up similar, if not better, numbers to Brown, and I think their numbers are going to be similar anyway, even though Odell's not on that team. Now, what is that team? It's not just future Hall of Famer Big Ben Roethlisberger, Stephen A. Is it a coincidence that D'Angelo Williams is setting records for running backs at the age of 33? I mean, he's a good running back, don't get me wrong. Give him credit. Le'Veon Bell, when he's healthy, is clearly, to my eye, the best in the game at that position. Why is this? Why is it that Roethlisberger suddenly at this point in his career, and I get it, Haley now, he feels more ownership in the offense now, and he's been in the league a bunch of years. It's not like this kind of simple job that he had to do when he was a younger quarterback. He now has more responsibility in the offense, and he's a great quarterback. I'm not questioning any of that. But suddenly he looks like a cross between Dan Marino and Brett Favre and Peyton Manning. And Antonio Brown is putting this kind of distance between him and the next best receiver. And Le'Veon Bell, when he's on the field, is clearly better than everyone. And D'Angelo Williams looks like an elite back. It's the offensive line. That offensive line is special. And I'm not to take anything away from the skills positions because they get it done. They're excellent, of course. But when you put excellent or great skills positions players behind a fantastic offensive line, they look different than everyone else. So Washington, what were they doing on defense? Getting their butts whooped. I mean, of course this was going to happen on defense for Washington. They're playing Pittsburgh, Stephen A. Pittsburgh going to do this to a lot of teams this year.
Well, in fairness to what you're saying, Max Kellerman, there were guys on the offensive side of the ball to the Washington Redskins who felt exactly the way that you did, that their defensive line got pretty beat up. D'Angelo Williams running 26 times, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, skirting through the defense, you know, hitting gaps, hitting holes, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, let's talk about the dollars and cents here. You gave Josh Norman $75 million, $50 million in guaranteed. Breland is a guy that you believe in, but Josh Norman is the big offseason acquisition. He was the one that was supposed to buffer the secondary that had you talking about the Washington Redskins secondary, a weak link for them to some degree last year as possibly being top 5 this year. And then they go out and lay that egg. And it wasn't because you put your best guy on their best guy. It was because you literally schematically had your best guy supposedly in Josh Norman avoiding Antonio Brown. Now, if you know anything about Josh Norman, this is where I'm going to come to Josh Norman's defense. Don't tell me that brother's running from the challenge. I don't want to hear that. Now, I believe in cat. I don't know if you ever heard about this. You ever heard of cat coverage, Max Kellerman? Have you ever heard of cat coverage? Yes or no?
Yeah, I've heard, but I'm offhand. Go ahead. Yes.
Let me tell you what cat coverage is.
Yes.
I learned what cat coverage was from Chris Carter and Ray Lewis last year on Monday Night Football when the game was in Atlanta and Julio Jones was playing wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. And Ray Lewis said, you know what cat coverage is? I got that cat. You got that cat? Who got that cat? Get that cat right there. Get that cat right there. That's who you get. You understand? That's what cat coverage is, okay? So if you're Josh Norman, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking along the lines of, I'm Josh Norman. I'm the $50 million man guaranteed, that is, okay? I'm going to sit there and say, I got that cat right there, Antonio Brown. I don't want to hear it. The problem is that because he came into this season bloviating about who he was and how gung-ho he was, and people were sort of put off by it, I believe that he wanted to follow the game plan of the Washington Redskins because he didn't want to create any kind of tension or anything like that. That's my personal belief. I don't know that. I didn't speak to him about that part, but that's what I personally believe. Having said that, my point is it should not have even come to that for the Washington Redskins. You should have put Josh Norman in a position wherever Antonio Brown went, he goes. Plain and simple. Whatever side of the field Antonio Brown is on, he's on that side, as opposed to having Josh Norman on the left side at all times, because it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Cat coverage. That's funny. That's not what I thought you were talking about. Yeah.
Well, that's Ray Lewis and Chris Carter.
Yeah.
That's what they say. I got that cat right there. You got that cat. I got that cat.
Whatever cat is on Antonio Brown is going to get it. You can't just single cover him. That goes for everyone. There are, cover corners in the history of football that are legitimate cover corners that can take away the other team's best receiver. When that best receiver is elite, you can count them on one hand in my lifetime. You know, Deion Sanders, Darrelle Revis, most recently. There are so few guys like that ever lived. And Norman's a good player, but he's not that. You have to devote more resources than one guy, even if it is Josh Norman on Antonio Brown, and he's still probably going to get his.
No Le'Veon Bell.
Well, but here's the part that's unforgivable about it. If you look at anybody in the AFC North who obviously play against the Steelers better, more so than anybody else, therefore would be more familiar with this guy, you know that the Cincinnati Bengals ain't going to single cover Antonio Brown. You know Baltimore's not going to do that. You know Cleveland's not going to do it. And Antonio Brown has had 1,400 plus, 1,600 plus, 1,800 plus yards in the last 3 seasons on 375 receptions. On top of it all, Marcus Wheaton is not there. Sammy Coates is a role player that's trying to be on a come-up. Ladarius Green wasn't available. Heath Miller has retired. Martavis Bryant couldn't stay off the weed, and as a result, he's out for the season. And Le'Veon Bell is not a guy that's going to be catching passes out of the backfield. Why in God's name, if you are the Washington Redskins, would you not double cover this man? It makes no sense. It is idiotic. It is inexcusable. And Jay Gruden and Barry, the defensive coordinator, cannot be excused on this day for making such a colossal, flagrant error. It's inexcusable.
And Stephen A., with all those missing weapons you just highlighted, they dropped 38 on the Redskins. Imagine this team was at full strength. I'm just salty we didn't get to see the offense like that, but still getting the job done, of course, with Big Ben and Antonio Brown. You can never count them out. And they had a milestone catch last night. They combined for 500 completions. Antonio Brown has over 150 receptions and over 2,000 receiving yards in the last 16 games where Ben Roethlisberger has played, which would be season records. Stephen A., I love this question and this next conversation. Is this the most dangerous quarterback-wide receiver combo we've seen in NFL history?
Say yes. Say yes.
Definitively, I can't say yes. I can tell you that. Let me finish. It is something that I'm strongly considering. The only reason why I'm not definitive about it is because I'm thinking about it and I'm saying Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice. So I'm thinking about it along those ways. I remember Dan Marino with Mark Super Duper Mark Clayton. I remember Dan Fouts with a Charlie Joyner and ultimately a Kellen Winslow. I remember Montana with Rice and Taylor, Steve Young with Rice, the Troy Aikmans, the Michael Irvins. You know what? I might have to say yes. I might have to go with that. I mean, as I sit here and think about it, I have not seen. I'm just, look, Antonio Brown last night began his 7th season. The first 3 years of his career, while he was getting himself acclimated, you have to wonder. But over the last 3 years, if you can give me the last 3 years and just go from there, I don't know. I don't know how we can refute this. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Ben Roethlisberger is better than Joe Montana. I'm not even willing to say that Ben Roethlisberger is more potent than Steve Young because, see, Steve Young, our very own Steve Young, was sensational. And we all know that there's only one Jerry Rice. But as a combination, I have not seen it. Jerry Rice only has, he's got like 4 seasons of over 1,500 yards in his 22-year career. Antonio Brown is entering his 7th season, and he's got 1,800+ season and 3 1,500+ seasons overall. But what I'm seeing right now with Big Ben and Antonio, it might be the best. I don't want to sound blasphemous. It might be the best. I got to reach out to Prime Time, and I got to reach out to Chris Carter. I got to reach out to my boys. I got to figure it out. Max, I don't know, Max. I don't know. I don't know.
Let me save you
Max,
some time.
I don't want to sound blasphemous.
Let me save you some time.
It might be, Max. Okay. It might be the best.
No, it's not.
It might be.
No, it's not. I can definitively tell you at this moment, it's not. You want to say one day we may look back if they keep doing this forever and ever? Maybe. But let me break this down scientifically, Stephen A. There are 2 ways you can look at the best tandem, right? Quarterback, receiver. You can say who had the greatest longevity at the high level, career value, and who hit the highest heights, who hit the peaks.
Don't bring in longevity.
Well,
Don't bring in longevity, though, because Antonio's in the 7th season. Don't bring in longevity.
Okay, so then it might be too early to say. But or who hit the highest peaks. Now, let's talk first career value. Montana to Rice, until further notice, is #1 when you talk about how high they hit and how long they maintained it. Now, you can say, but look at the yards Antonio Brown's putting up year after year. He did half of what Rice, or almost what Rice did in half the time in terms of peak seasons, because he's playing in an offensive environment that favors the passer. Points are cheap now. They were expensive when Walsh was revolutionizing offense and Montana was hooking up with Rice. Each touchdown was worth much more than it is today. So that's why receivers and quarterbacks keep putting up these monster numbers and eye-popping numbers, because it's easier to do it now than it was then. So, of course, it looks amazing recently, and even compared to their contemporaries, their peers, Roethlisberger and Brown are special, don't get me wrong, but they ain't Montana and Rice yet, even if it looks like the peak is almost there already. Well, now let's talk about the highest heights for a second.
But you're cheating. You're cheating.
How?
You're cheating, man.
Because I haven't even, that's just the one. I haven't hit you with the two yet.
Well, but because
it's a two-piece.
No, the reason I'm saying you're cheating is because you know I'm not measuring in terms of accomplishments, because he's only entering his 7th year, and there's no way that his accomplishments can measure up to what you're talking about. So we know I'm not talking about that.
Okay, would you like to talk about peak?
That's cheating.
Would you like to talk about peak?
Sure, we can go there. We can go there.
Tom Brady and Randy Moss hooked up for 23 touchdowns in a 16-0 season.
That's true.
So they don't have the peak and they don't have the career. So what do they got?
But they lost the Super Bowl to your Giants.
Okay, but that's no question.
They didn't close.
No question
about it. They didn't close. I mean, there's something to be said about the fact that they didn't close.
Okay, but these guys have never won a Super Bowl together. None. I mean, Montana and Rice won 3, and Rice and Young won 1. Roethlisberger's won a Super Bowl, but never with Antonio Brown. So when you look at the career, they haven't done it long enough. That's fair. You can't compare them to Montana and Rice yet. Plus, the offensive era in which they're operating rewards offensive players to a greater extent than it did then. And if you want to talk about peak hit, they haven't hit Randy Moss and Tom Brady yet. Now, here's something you can say about them. You can say that they've put together a 3-year stretch that is as good as any 3-year stretch in the history of football. Although, because it's one receiver, Kurt Warner has Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. Peyton Manning, obviously, with Marvin Harrison, would have something to say about that. But you could say 3 years consecutively, quarterback, receiver. It's as good as any we've seen so far, although they are playing behind a great offensive line with a great running game in an era that favors the pass.
Yeah, you can go there, but I can go back to what you talked about with Randy Moss. Brady was absolutely sensational, 50 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, if I remember correctly, back in 2007 when he connected with Randy Moss.
Pretty good off the top of your head.
Randy Moss had 98 receptions, Randy Moss had 19 receptions. Was it like 1,493 yards, something along those lines? I'm saying to you, when we look at the numbers that Antonio Brown has put up over the past few years, I mean, the role that they are on right now, I don't know if I've seen, I really, really don't know if I've seen anything like this. This is something that's special. Now, you could be assisted by the rules, and I'm certainly not going to sit up there and act like I can summarily dismiss your point about Randy Moss and Tom Brady, because just the names alone, I mean, it's almost blasphemous to think that there's somebody that could eclipse how great they absolutely were. I get all of that, but I'm looking at Antonio Brown and the 3-year run that he's had and how he just looks to be so completely unstoppable.
Let me say this about Brown. Antonio Brown is trying to make the case for himself that he's the greatest receiver ever. We'll see if he gets there, but he's in that conversation already. And Ben Roethlisberger, you do have to give him credit after I took a little away in the previous argument. He went from a big kind of tough football player with a simple kind of job in the offense who rode a great defense to victories early in his career to a big, strong football player who reads defenses beautifully on the fly, checks down when he has to, improvises, uses his legs, his size, his arm, his brain. He is a complete and all-time great quarterback in his prime.
Thank you for making my points. I appreciate you. I'm very touched by the fact that you needed to close with your little soliloquy, really making my point even better.
Well, you already conceded the argument.
Than I was trying to.
You already conceded the argument, so no big deal.
No, I didn't concede anything.
sounded
I'm
like it to
saying
me.
that you low. This three-year run is what I'm talking about right
Rewind
here.
the tape
This is
another
something
time.
special.
You
I mean,
DVR
I got
the show,
Hall of
right? Go
Famers
back and watch. You'll
texting
see
me
you
right
conceded
now.
it.
I got Hall of Famers right now texting me right now, telling me I need to be drug tested, but they're missing my point. I get it. I understand it. I'm just talking about what I'm seeing right now. It's special. It's special.
It's so special, and it's so fun to watch. We want you guys to weigh in on this conversation at home. It's a fun one. Which quarterback wide receiver duo best of all time? Montana Rice, Manning Harrison, Brady Moss, Roethlisberger Brown. Go to our First Take Twitter page. Hit us up. We'll share those results a little later in the show. And get your Hall of Famer friends to weigh in as well, Stephen A., would you?